A tuple is an immutable list, meaning once it's defined, it cannot be changed. With normal lists, you can add, remove, and change the values in the list, but with tuples, you can't. Tuples, like lists, are ordered, and the values in the tuple can be accessed by index. You can perform many of the same operations on a tuple that you can on a list. You can iterate over the values in a tuple with a for loop. You can concatenate tuples. You can access values from the end of the tuple using negative indices, and you can access slices of a tuple. Tuples are created using comma-separated values between parentheses. The format is tuple name equals open parentheses item, comma, the next item, and so on until there are no more items you want to define in the tuple, and then the close parentheses. If you only want a single item in a tuple, that single item must be followed by a comma. The format is tuple name equals item, comma, close parentheses. Tuples are great for holding data that will not or should not change during the execution of your program. Using a tuple ensures that the values are not accidentally altered. For example, the days of the week should not change during an execution of your program. The code on your screen starts by storing a tuple in the days of the week variable. This tuple contains 7 values. On line 2, we access the first value in the tuple by index. Like lists, tuples use zero-based indices. Next, we print the value to the screen and then print a blank line. Finally, we loop through the tuple printing out each item. The output will include all 7 items, but it's cut off on your screen here. This example really demonstrates how tuples can be treated like lists. The biggest difference between a tuple and a list is that the tuple is immutable, meaning you can't modify it. If you were to try to change a value in a tuple, we will encounter an error. Here, the Python interpreter tells us that tuples do not support item assignment. Even though you can't change the values in a tuple, you can remove the entire tuple during the execution of your program by using the del statement. In this example, we create a tuple and display it to the screen. Next, we delete the tuple with a del statement. Finally, just to demonstrate that the tuple is no longer available, I try to access it and an exception is thrown. To create a list from a tuple, use the list built-in function and pass in the tuple. To create a tuple from a list, use the tuple built-in function. The built-in function type reveals an object's type. In this example, we first create a tuple on line 1. Next, we pass in that tuple to the built-in list function and store that list in the weekend list variable. The next 2 lines use the type function to display the types of the objects. Here we're just confirming that the tuple is a tuple and that the list is a list. This example starts with a list on line 1. Next, we create a tuple by passing in that list to the tuple built-in function. Finally, we print the object's type to the screen. If you want to perform some action on every item in a tuple, use a for loop. The format is for item variable and tuple name. You'll notice that the line ends in a colon. Next, you follow this line with a block of code that you want to execute on each item in the tuple. This example demonstrates how to loop through a tuple. First, a tuple is created. Next, we use a for loop just like we would with a list. This for loop simply prints each item in the tuple to the screen. You can use tuples to assign values to multiple variables at once. In the example on your screen, the variables sat and sun are assigned the weekend days from the weekend days tuple. We print out the contents of each variable to demonstrate that this method does indeed work. The sat variable contains the Saturday string, and the sun variable contains the Sunday string. You can also use tuple assignment with lists. Here we assign the first value in the list to the phone variable and the second item in the contact info list to the email variable. Then we display that information to the screen. Tuple assignment can be used with functions as well. For example, you could create a function that returns a tuple and assign those values to different variables. This example uses the built-in max and min functions. The max built-in function returns the largest item that is passed in. The min built-in function returns the smallest item that is passed to it. The high and low function returns a tuple containing the highest and lowest number of the list that was passed into the high and low function. We create a variable called lottery numbers and assign a list of numbers to it. On the next line, the high and low function is called with the lottery numbers as an argument. The first number returned by the function will be stored in the first variable in the tuple, which is highest. Likewise, the second number will be stored in the second variable, which is lowest. We print the values of these variables to the screen with a couple of print functions. You'll notice that 42 is the highest number and it's printed first, and 4 is the lowest number in that list and it is printed on the last line. You can use tuple assignment in a for loop as well. In this example, the contacts list contains a series of tuples. Each time the for loop is executed, the variables name and phone are populated with the contents of a tuple from the contacts list. The result of running this code is that the name and phone number for each item in the list is displayed to the screen.